Welcome everyone to the Faculty of Political Science at Chulalongkorn University. We are sitting at the 12th floor of Kasem Mutianin building. Actually, this is the conference room of the Political Science Alumni Association. So they're located here, and welcome everyone to the conference today. And this is my welcoming remarks. And my name is Prakorn Siriprakob, I'm the Dean of the Faculty of Political Science. I'm Mr. Jérémy, Director of IRASEC, distinguished scholars, practitioners, and friends. On behalf of Chulalongkorn University and the Faculty of Political Science, it is my great pleasure to welcome you to Bangkok and to our study day and writing workshop on Epistemologies of Participatory Research on Social Development Programs in Southeast Asia. This gathering comes at a pivotal moment of our region. Over recent decades, participatory approaches have moved from the margins to the mainstream of the development research and practice, shaped by shifting age paradigms. The disruption of COVID-19, the tragedy and uncertainty of conflict, new national research policies, and the accelerating realities of climate emergency. These forces compel us to reflect not only on what we study, but on how we come to know with whom we co-produce knowledge and to what ends. Our aim over these 2 days is threefold. One, to take stock of grounded long-term participatory research traditions across Southeast Asia. Two, to learn across differences, political contexts, institution mandates, and methodological lineages by placing our practices in comparative and reflexive dialogue. And three, to build for the future, consolidating a network and beginning a collective writing effort toward a special journal issue that can speak with both scholarly rigor and civic purpose. We are privileged to be joined by colleagues whose work exemplify the breadth and depth of participatory inquiry in our region. From the Alternative Development, AltDev, team at CIDS, University of Philippines, Diliman, Professor Eduardo Tadem, Ms. Simeona Martinez, and Dr. Maria Dulce, Natividad, whose scholar activist engagement with CSO illuminate participatory models that are both critical and constructive. From IPB University and Sajogyo Institute, Saints, Bogor, Dr. Mohammad Sohibuddin and Mr. Habibur Rahman, who extend Professor Sajogyo's legacies by linking agro-ecological knowledge, youth training, and food sovereignty amid urbanization and environmental stress. From the National University of Singapore, Dr. Serena Raman, who sustained facilitation with coastal communities in Johor, shows how participation can endure and evolve, supporting livelihoods, conservation, and community leadership through times of rapid change. From Chiang Mai University's CESD, RCSD, Dr. Mali Sethi Priyankai, continuing a traditional participatory practice that has amplified liberal-aligned communities' voices and now supports students displaced by conflict to reconnect field learning with critical scholarship. And from the wider transdisciplinary community, Ms. Julia Sungandi, whose work bridges regenerative and decolonial perspectives, behavioral insights, and system thinkings to strengthen ecological awareness, gender equity, and planetary justice. Over the next 2 days, our study day sessions will foreground cases and methods, followed tomorrow by a writing workshop designed to transform change insights into a special issue, manuscript plan, proposed sections, cross-country cooperative frames, ethical protocol for co-authorship and credit, and a realistic production timeline. We encourage you to use the breaks in discussion to form writing clusters that cut across institutions, disciplines, and roles academics, practitioners, and community leaders. Let me close with 3 brief invitations. The first one is be comparative. Look for resonances and productive friction. between coastal and upland, rural and urban crisis response, and long-term stewardship. Second, be reflexive. Ask not only what our methods reveal, but what they obscure, and not only who speaks, but who designs. Not only how we cite, but how we share authorship and ownership. And the third one, be generative. Live here with commitment to co-write, to cross-visit, to pool resources, to mentor younger scholars and community researchers, and to keep this network alive for the long term. My thanks to IRASEC, our co-hosts and intellectual partners, to our speakers and discussants, and to our staff who have made this event possible. I also extend a warm welcome to participants joining us today. May our time together be rigorous, humble, and hopeful. With that, it is my honor to declare the study day open. I wish you all a stimulating conversation and fruitful collaboration. And thank you and welcome to the Faculty of Political Science at Chulalongkorn University. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Prakorn, first for this very comprehensive introduction, and also for hosting us in your very nice place, very nice Faculty of Political Science. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Jérémy.
Well, I'm Jérémy James. I'm the new director of IRASEC, the Research Institute on Contemporary Southeast Asia. So I just arrived last week at my position. I don't have any jet lag, so it's okay so far. I would like to really warmly thank you for attending this two-day very stimulating workshop for me. So 1 week ago, my deputy, Gabriel Facal, said, okay, Jérémy, please, can you give a key, just an introduction? So I don't want to be too formal because of the topic. The topic is also participatory research, which is fundamentally fluid and approach, I would say, very flexible approach of the fieldwork. So I don't want to be too formal here. Also because my background is a social anthropologist. And my mentor, maybe you know, was Professor George Condominas, which we trained, we can say, 4 generations of social anthropologists in France. And for him, fieldwork was always the key of communication, of science, and so he always focused on that. And for my modest experience, my focus is on, I'm a social anthropologist on religion, working on religious groups and conversion, missionary. So how do we, from my perspective, my modest perspective, the participation, you know, we have always the observation and participation dynamic when we're conducting field work. And for me, participation during this, along my experience along with some religious group, or it can be Christian, Muslim conversion, missionaries, Catholic missionaries, etc. Well, it was attending some rituals, practicing rituals, but also sometimes cleaning the temple, cleaning the pagoda, the altars, also attending and moving some community members, attending a lot of funerals, community members that sometimes were friends, of course. So it was attending funerals of friends, but also part of my fieldwork, of course, during a couple of many years. So I don't want to monopolize the floor, and because I saw the list of the participants, of your title of the speakers, and of course it's very exciting. So I cannot wait actually here hearing all your presentations. So I just have a couple of words that came to my mind when I saw the bibliography when I saw the title of intervention of the papers. First of all, it comes to my mind that this workshop is really linked to a new research field we called the post-Western theory. The post-Western theory, and here I'm glad to see, for instance, a really concrete example is focused on sharing transnational experiences at the same and equal level. It's not imposing, as we say, a colonial approach on participation, for instance, but it's much farther. Post-Western theory goes much farther than post-colonial studies, I think, and I think we can develop that further. Also, it comes to my mind the relationship between the fieldwork and the self. The fieldwork is the self, and the self was actually, maybe some of you know this book I've co-edited with Victor King a couple of years ago. This book actually features on methodological, ethical, also emotional, personal aspect of fieldwork, emphasizing reflexivity, introspection, identity, of course, participation of the researcher in the studies. So some of you maybe went through this book and some of chapters and collect some testimony of fieldworking, of experience by scholar colleagues like, for instance, Sayid Farid Alatas, Chang Yu Hun, Romel Guhami from Philippines, etc. And also in Malaysia, I remember this great scholar and late scholar, one Ibrahim Zawawi, which was a great colleague and friend, who was actually there's a fantastic chapter here, remembering the fieldwork, where actually he remember his childhood actually participating to the fishing activity of his fisher village, and how as researcher, as ethnographer we are, so we can use our memory actually as a complementary of fieldwork as well. But also it's a participation where we were child or teenager, etc. So how to combine all together this long life experience and participation to our analysis. Then we are in the Faculty of Political Science, and I saw in the bibliography here and there the notion of activism, of ethno-activism. And that's, I think, is a very interesting topic. So I don't have answers so far, because you will provide maybe more answer than me on this topic, but when does begin ethno-activism? Consciously or not, actually. How to merge science and activism, of course. How far can actually ethno-activism still be acceptable from a scientific point of view, etc. And that, I think, we will have a lot of answers thanks to you, and I'm very happy I'm very excited and to look forward to hearing all of your papers. So now I give the floor to my colleague Gabriel Facal, who is actually the organizer, the mastermind actually of this conference. Thank you again for attending this meeting. Thank you.
Good morning. Yes, I will give a very brief last introductory word because you all want to hear our invites. First, I would like to thank the co-organizers at the Faculty of Political Science here at Chulalongkorn, Mr. the Dean Prakorn Siriprakob for giving the introductory words, all the team from IRASEC as well. We have here the Director, but also Bertrand Vallier, who will record the different sessions and will assist us in different matters. So if you have any technical question, you can also ask to Bertrand and to me, of course. And finally, thank you to the participants, to the speakers who come from Indonesia, through Kuala Lumpur, from Papua as well, from the fieldwork directly. We have also speakers from Singapore/Malaysia, coming from far. Ajahn Mali coming from Chiang Mai University, and the first team of speakers coming from Manila. Thank you so much for coming from so far, for taking the time to share your experiences. It has been quite a long time with some of you that we are collaborating. I'm very grateful for that. And I'm so happy that finally we are able to gather, even though it will be for a short time. It will be only 1 day and a half. So it will be so intense. And after that, we will probably exchange a lot by emails before, I hope, gathering together maybe for another event in the next month. I didn't mention also the students who came from the faculty. Thank you for coming, and also from the researchers and scholars from the faculty who attend today. I hope I don't forget anyone, except Jean-Christophe Castella, who will be the discussant for this morning discussion. He's from IRASEC, the French Research Institute on Development. And it leads me to a transition, giving you only a few elements about the background of our different respective collaborations. First, beginning with Jean-Christophe, we organized this year, he organized particularly, he was the scientific designer of a training for students at Chiang Mai University. It was a multi-stakeholder approach, so it was also a participatory approach. He's very experienced in this kind of approach, particularly in northern Thailand and Laos. Correct me if I'm mistaken, of course. Then we had collaborations also with Jean-Christophe, but also with the Philippine teams, the Indonesian colleagues, during a winter school on sustainable development studies. It was on last December 2024. It was particularly in partnership with Thammasat University and with the University of the Philippines, with the CIDS, which is the Center for Integrative Development Studies. And within the CIDS, there is a specific program called Alternative Development, which is today represented by our 4 colleagues here. There was also several collaborations with Ajahn Mali Sitikran-Krai, particularly here at the Faculty of Political Science. It was in 2022 for a seminar on water governance. And after that, Ajahn Mali was keen enough to invite us to Chiang Mai University together with Chayam Vadanaputi for different seminars. And we invited you also for the winter school that I mentioned before. With Serena Abdul-Rahman, we are currently finishing a special issue for a journal based in Singapore called Transregional Studies. It is about engagement in social science research. So I think it's not far from what we are talking today in some aspects. So today we have been able to meet together, but some key elements are missing, unfortunately. I would like to mention particularly Professor Eduardo Tadem from CIDS, who unfortunately could not attend today. It's the same case for Ajahn Chayam Vadanaputi from Chiang Mai University. And there was also a prominent scholar, Welch Aziz, from the Philippines as well, from Ateneo de Manila University, who unfortunately, because she's also an elder, could not attend today, but special thanks to them for their collaboration, for facilitating our exchanges in the long run. So in the different collaborations that I mentioned, there are many approaches, participatory approach, co-construction of knowledge, or whatever the terms that everyone uses. And I think it's interesting to reflect together because of your national histories, the socio-political context in which the approaches emerged, your particular experiences as individuals or as team, and the creation of methods that you developed since for some of you for decades. So it will be, I think, very intense on these different topics, the exchange that we have. Tomorrow we will have a closed session with the speakers also to reflect on how to write together based on what will have been presented today. Maybe now only very few elements on logistics. So the presentation will last 1 hour each presentation. We are so late that I will give the possibility to the Philippines team to extend a bit their intervention if you wish so. We have a big coffee breaks, so you could overpass the limitation of time. There is no issue. The importance here is to have a qualitative exchange. So you can do as you want as speakers. You can use the whole hour to do only a presentation, or to include within the hour a time for discussion. But we will also have time for discussion at the end of the morning and afternoon session, so we will have plenty of time to exchange. And last point to address is about your consent for the broadcasting of the filming today. So I distributed a consent form for the speakers. Please give it back to Bertrand Baillet. If you don't accept to be recorded, it is not an issue at all. We will just edit the video accordingly. I will not talk longer, and I would like now to give the floor to the Philippines team. Maybe just a short presentation about the AltDev program at CIDS, University of the Philippines, Diliman. The center was founded by Dr. Eduardo Tadem, that I mentioned earlier. He's a specialist in multidisciplinary area studies. AltDev is an academic and policy-oriented research initiative. It seeks to critically examine dominant development paradigms and explore transformative, people-centered alternatives. It collaborates with civil society organizations, with grassroots and people's organizations to support various marginalized communities in Manila and more broadly in the Philippines. AltDev also has an international scope because it plays a key role in the Asian Civil Society Conference, which is critics toward the ASEAN's formal participatory models as it advocates for more meaningful bottom-up regional solidarity and integration. The 4 speakers today will be Maria Dulce Natividad, Rafael Vicente Di Malanta, Maria Simeona Medina Martinez, or Maoni, and Eunice Bautista Santiago. The floor is yours, and again, a warm welcome, and thank you so much.
Good morning to everyone, and on behalf of the Philippines team, I would like to express how excited we are in being part of this workshop. Not only is this a chance for us to present our work, but it is a wonderful opportunity to meet kindred spirits. I was going to present a background on the program, but Gabriel already said something about AltDev, but let me just add a little bit. So, AltDev, or Alternative Development Program, was established in 2017. So it was fairly recent that it started running. Its founder, Professor Eduardo Tadem, and the team have been actively involved in social movements and development work for many decades. It is one of 12 programs under the Center for Integrative and Development Studies which is the main policy research unit of the University of the Philippines. It aims to look at paradigms, policies, practices, and projects that challenge dominant development models. It also seeks to bring these alternatives out of the margins and into the mainstream and level the playing field, so to speak, so that they may be regarded as on equal footing with dominant discourses and thus offer alternatives to the existing system. For the past years, the main strategy of AltDev, as we are called, is to document alternative practices that challenge these dominant development models. And the scope of our work covers the Philippines and Southeast Asia. So the impetus for the establishment of the program was really a critique of traditional development models and the recognition that there is another way of doing development. The starting point for this critique is to ask, why does existing traditional development models have not meaningfully addressed social problems and people's needs? So while the objective of development in general is to ask how to make life better for all, the more contentious question is, what is a better life? And from whose perspective should we view this? So what currently exists, however, is a development process and ethos that is based on capitalist vested interest, one that is extractive, exploitative, and top-down. This has left communities, in many cases, powerless in the face of development onslaught. And this has resulted in the entrenchment of social hierarchies and the deepening of inequalities and injustice. So we have also seen that there is forcible imposition of order, security, and regulation in the name of development. Next slide. So AltDev, through its activities and programs, hopes to popularize alternative perspectives on development. These are not new perspectives, but they have been around for some time. But again, they have been marginalized. So what are some elements of this alternative view of development? So one is it's people-centered. It recognizes that people are not mere recipients of development, but they are capable of self-organizing and directing their own development. It puts human values, capacities, and realities at the forefront rather than putting the emphasis on market, efficiency, and growth. It is not defined by a single model or theory or prescription, but alternative development is born out of practice. It is formulated and envisioned by people through consensus and most of the time through contention. And last, it relies on participation, building connections, solidarity, and creating bases of unity towards creating a better future. So a major strategy for popularizing alternative development models is the documentation of cases and experiences on the ground that challenge and resist existing development paradigms, and bravely experiment with and introduces alternative ways of organizing communities and conducting our everyday life. AltDev partners with grassroots communities, organizations, and from different sectors to document their struggles, resistances, dreams, and collective action to change and transform society. So the program envisions that through its documentation efforts, it can contribute to linking peoples and communities in the Philippines and in the rest of Southeast Asia to form the building blocks of a people's alternative regional integration, a form of integration that puts people first rather than profits or vested interests. And so, in documenting, we ask the following questions. How do grassroots communities respond and act in the face of inadequacies and failures of development? How do they make sense of their situation and context? What strategies do they develop in the process of acting? And what lessons can we learn from their struggles? As a counter-narrative to neoliberal research, this narrating and documenting, AltDev privileges the experiences, stories, and realities and knowledge of the marginalized, neglected, and oppressed. We use this as a platform for reimagining and envisioning a different world. And when we partner with communities, we involve them in identifying research problems, objectives, and data gathering. And the documentation is validated by the same communities. The researchers and writers are embedded in the communities as members, organizers, advocates, activists, working with the same communities. So in the AltDev's documentation, so now we go to how does it all relate to R? In doing our documentation work, we did not consciously conceive of it as participatory action research. When it started, it was work. We did it as part of our activist work within the academy, maximizing and using resources of the university, but applying some principles of participatory action research. And so we asked ourselves, and we were talking about this yesterday as a team, we asked ourselves, what makes our work participatory action research? And these are some of our thoughts. First, AltDev's documentation gives space to for grassroots communities to tell and write their stories from their own perspectives and own language. They make sense of their experience and struggles, which can be an empowering process. So we have here the power of narratives. AltDev's documentation work has served as the backbone for the program's mission of building grassroots linkages, partnerships, and solidarity. Concretely, the participants and partners of AltDev were invited as delegates to the Southeast Asia regional conferences and people-to-people exchanges. This solidarity is further strengthened through the conduct of an annual regional conference on alternative practices in Southeast Asia. And participants from the Philippines, Cambodia, Laos, Indonesia, Malaysia, Myanmar, Thailand, Timor-Leste, Vietnam, and the Thai border were all involved. And the goal of the conference is for grassroots organizations to showcase their alternative practices and learn from each other. Next, AltDev's documentation has become a vehicle for testing and demonstrating visions of alternative development. The action plan from previous conferences, for example, have led to people-to-people exchanges from the same countries. And there were opportunities to share and demonstrate various forms of resistances against capitalist and state incursions into rural and land union busting. So now, on its 6th year, the yearly conference has resulted in the formation of MASA, the Movement for Alternative and Solidarity in Southeast Asia, which envisions an alternative form of regionalism. So, as of 2025, we have documented 90 cases, covering all the countries that I mentioned already. And we have 2 monographs that have been published in previous years, and we are expecting the publication of the 3rd one soon. Alternative case studies, we have listed in this slide a sample of these case studies. So we have case studies among indigenous peoples, on alternative trade and people's economy, health and well-being, gender activism, farmers, and others. And a note also is that these cases are of various types and kinds. So there are histories of struggles, there are documentation of implementations of projects, documentation of impact of development incursions, and there are also first-hand narratives. So this is my the last few slides. So, but a few caveats. These are unfinished stories, and all cases of alternative practices are still ongoing. And some, sadly, have not been sustained. But we do not see them as necessarily failures, but they are part of our experiments with creating a different future. So we always talk of global futures now. And haven't you noticed that grassroots communities are not part of that discourse? But it's so highfalutin, and the people that really matter are not engaged in this conversation. So next. Can we go back to, I think I missed, yes. So these stories are starting points for discussing how to approach development and the future, not through a development of a monolithic and grand view. Rather, this is achieved through grounded and real discussions about people's aspirations, struggles, weaknesses, and strengths. And then can we go next? So this morning we have 3 presentations, and you see the presentations, and I will let them explain later. And in preparing for these presentations, next slide please, we tried to ask questions based on Ledwin's questions so far. I can't read because it's so far, but there are questions there about methodology, power, relevance, and process. We did not, I think we were not able to answer all, but we tried, we attempted to cover these questions in the presentations of my colleagues. So I will stop here and let Arvin continue the presentation.
Hello. Magandang umaga. Good morning, everyone. Again, I am Arvin from the Philippines. I will be presenting the experiences in practicing activist research with people's organizations in the Philippines, particularly in the urban, poor, and informal transport sectors. Specifically through the work of the research-oriented NGO Integrative or Safe San Roque, which I'm also affiliated with, alongside the program of, on alternative development of UP CIDS. Oh, I go back, please. Another one. Okay, thank you. Okay, next slide, please. There we go. Okay, so I start with forwarding elements of scholar activism. So first, there's criticality. This is questioning dominant discourses, producing alternative knowledge, practicing reflexivity by recognizing personal experiences, biases, and values. Second, an orientation towards social change and justice. Recognizing first and foremost, there are injustices produced by neoliberalism, capitalism, imperialism, and colonial legacies. And aligning with marginalized sectors and their struggle for social change and justice. And lastly, active engagement, which is essentially positioning ourselves as part of social movement and not merely as outside observers. Next slide, please. Okay. So activist research is the practice where these different elements converge. In this, knowledge produced directly supports the social change and justice objectives of social movements. It is deeply interconnected with the other dimensions of activist work, or we call it the Philippines gawain, which is essentially work. So these are organizing, education, alliance building, advocacy, campaign. So there are different terms, but basically I'm sure there are similar definitions in our own languages. Okay, next slide, please. So my activist research practice began in 2018 with Safe San Roque. So it's a volunteer NGO that supported the Urban Poor People's Organization, which is Kadamay San Roque, in its advocacy for asserting housing rights and for on-site or in-city social housing. So this later evolved into Inclusivo. So you can see the logos there. It's a small research-oriented NGO working with sectoral people's organizations or POs, such as the Nationwide Urban Poor Alliance, Kadamay, and the Nationwide Informal Transport Federation, ISTON, which is composed largely of GP drivers and operators. So alongside this, I'm also affiliated with the program on alternative development, which further amplify these collaborations. So my sharing today focuses on these cases, Kadamay San Roque at the community level, and Kadamay as well as Piston at the sectoral level. Next slide, please. So the picture you can see here is an aerial view of the community, Sitio San Roque. It is one of the largest urban poor communities in Quezon City, Metro Manila. So this community since 2010 has faced repeated and continuous threats of demolition due to public-private partnership redevelopment projects aiming to transform the area, which is around 27 hectares, into a high-end commercial and residential district. So this is a common theme happening in all around the world. Among the oldest people's organizations, or POs here, is Kadamay San Roque. So it's known mostly for its militant and anti-eviction tactics and its defense of housing rights, specifically of renters, which in the context of urban poor communities are typically the most vulnerable, and they are not afforded of any social housing programs. Next slide, please. So to further assert their housing rights, Kadamay San Roque, together with Save San Roque or Inclusivo, developed a counter-proposal for on-site housing, which they call the Community Development Plan, or CDP. So the volunteer NGO Save San Roque was formed to assist in this effort, bringing together volunteers including built environment practitioners. I'm a community architect, practicing community architecture, which basically this takes inspiration from our participatory action research, but translated into the discipline of architecture. So I'm sure if you've heard of the Asian Coalition of Housing Rights. So I'm affiliated with that when I was working in the housing NGO. So the purpose of this CDP as a research was to articulate the community's alternative to eviction and displacement, producing evidence of socio-economic conditions of the residents and translating their aspirations into a concrete housing and site development plan. Next slide, please. So the methods combined quantitative and qualitative ones. A socio-economic survey, which you saw in the previous slides, was co-designed with a PO and covered 202 households, but this is a small portion only of the community. It documented the demographics, the income, livelihoods, housing conditions, and tenure status of the families. Complementing this was several participatory planning workshops in human settlement planning. So it was spanning from mapping, visioning, and different design exercises where residents co-created their ideal and aspirational housing layouts and shared spaces. So the CDP, or the Community Development Plan, became an advocacy tool for engagement with the government of the Quezon City local government unit. So it's also an organizing tool for the volunteers of the NGO themselves, and also as a tool for organizing other residents who are not yet members of the PO. And lastly, a means of alliance building with other organizations outside of the community. So while there were other research initiatives with Kadamay San Roque, for today I will only have time to share on this specific one. So next slide, please. So as I mentioned earlier, Save San Roque then transitioned into Inclusivo, which is now like a fully research-oriented NGO. Its activist research practice expanded basically from community-based struggles to more sectoral or broader struggles with nationwide POs such as the Kadamay National. So Kadamay San Roque is a chapter of Kadamay National, and Piston National. So as mentioned earlier, Inclusivo's activist research with sectoral POs was strengthened through collaboration with AltDev, which also connects with other POs and NGOs across the Southeast Asia region, further amplifying its knowledge outputs with its partner people's organizations. So just to give a brief explanation of AltDev, so it seeks to examine paradigms and practices that were marginalized from mainstream discourse and bring these alternatives to a wider audience. So you can see the overlaps between the work of Inclusivo as well as AltDev. So the collaboration between AltDev, Inclusivo, and the sectoral POs exemplifies what Boras calls the boundary between university-based and non-university-based scholar activists are blurred and porous and are regularly crossing over. So next slide, please. So with the Kadamay National, the focus of the activist research was ongoing demolitions of different urban poor communities due to infrastructure or so-called development projects, unaffordable or unlivable social housing in resettlement sites, and the government's push currently for high-rise housing typologies in social housing delivery. So the methods here were primarily qualitative, using content analysis of housing and eviction policies, focus group discussions, key informant interviews, and participatory workshops with the sectoral PO. Next slide, please. So on the other hand, with Piston National, the focus of the research was on transport policies threatening drivers and operators' livelihoods, especially the Public Utility Vehicle Modernization Program, or as we call it, it's the jeepney modernization program, or jeepney phase out, which pushes informal transport workers to acquire expensive modern vehicles, mostly from China, as well as the electrification of public utility vehicles without adequate support, both financial and institutional, from the government. So the methods here combine content analysis, the same kinds of methods that were used, which I mentioned earlier. Next slide, please. So just going over the reflections. These reflections are basically guided by two central questions. So for what and for whom is activist research conducted? So the knowledge outputs here were produced, were intended to support and improve the activist work of the partner people's organization. So its purpose was never limited to just knowledge production, but to reinforce other critical dimensions of activist work, such as organizing, education, networking, alliance building, or advocacy. These knowledge outputs either directly bolster ongoing efforts or contribute to refining tactics to more effectively advance their struggles for social change and justice. Its purpose is not knowledge for its own sake, but explicitly knowledge for action. Next slide. And the second question is, with whom and how is it carried out? So equally important here is the process of how activist research is conducted. So in our experience, three interrelated elements are essential. So number one is the trust and relationship building. So trust and relationships are essentially the foundation of activist research. With Kadami San Roque and even Kadami National, trust was built by being consistently present, attending meetings, assemblies, mobilizations, co-facilitating and planning workshops, and participating in different planning sessions. Relationships here were not automatic. It grew slowly from commitment and solidarity. In the case of Piston, trust and good relationship was accelerated through the involvement and eventual transfer of some volunteers of the NGO to the National Secretariat of the sectoral PO. Together, these two elements lay the groundwork for building strong partnerships that enabled activist research to take root and be carried out. So crucially, it was this foundation of trust and relationship that made possible the joint identification of research focus, ensuring that each initiative is relevant and useful to the partner people's organization. So second is co-decision. Research was co-determined with POs. The focus, whether on eviction, housing programs, transport modernization, was discussed and agreed upon together. Research methods such as surveys, FGDs, interviews, workshops, or content analysis were chosen based on what was the most useful, feasible, and workable at the time the research was needed for activist work. And then research activities were usually integrated into existing activities such as assemblies, consultations, being mindful of the heavy burdens that activists and even PO members are already facing outside of activist work. They have side jobs, they have care and domestic responsibilities. So initial outputs were most importantly validated with POs before any kind of public release. So co-decision made activist research responsive to the organization's needs and ensured that outputs were meaningful and usable for activist work. So while PAR as a methodology is not explicitly identified in the ways of practicing activist research, our practices align with and are informed by PAR. So lastly, embeddedness. Research was never separate from other dimensions of activist work. Embeddedness meant that research was not simply an add-on, but a critical dimension in activist work. This made it knowledge through action, produced by being immersed in the everyday practice of activism. So next slide please. So in both community and sectoral level cases which I shared, the focus, purpose, and methods of activist research practice were determined in dialogue and solidarity with the POs. Outputs were validated and intended to inform, strengthen their organizing, education, alliance building, and advocacy efforts. So more than outputs themselves, however, what was mattered most was the process. Research is rooted in trust and relationships, shaped through consistent dialogue, and carried out as part of the continuum of activist work in advancing social change and justice. Thank you. Yun lang. Maraming salamat.
Hello. Okay. Good day, everyone. I am Denise, one of the present researcher of the program on alternative development. On behalf of the team, I'll be sharing about our case study on Asamba. It's the Samahan Situaciones by sa Homeowners Association. This case study was written by the community itself alongside Christine Sincero, a development worker who lived with the community with the help of Carlo Habal, AltDev's former co-convener way back in 2020. So I will presenting this specifically, this publication, and the slides I will be presenting here came from that and from Tita Flora, one of the activists organizers in Asamba. So for context, Asamba is a communities association, a people's organization of urban poor residents in Situaciones, Paisa. The organization was formed as a response to forced evictions and demolitions to protect and advance its members' genuine right to housing. Next slide. Situaciones, according to Tita Flora, is part of the 6.2 hectare land historically owned by the Araneta family. However, in the 1950s, before the Aranetas came into light, around 50 families who came from Visayas, Ilocos people, and central region settled in Situaciones. So they were here even before the Aranetas. They lived by farming rice, vegetables, raising animals and fish, and working in factories, garments, and constructions. Next slide. Can you go back? Sorry. So in the picture, you can see the old picture of Situaciones. This was given by one of the communities. That's the old picture, and the other one is the present picture that I took from Google Slides. Google Maps, sorry. Next. So yeah, I'll be discussing this publication specifically. It's entitled Gibatayo, kasaysayan ng buhay ng maranitang tagalungsod ng Asamba. In translation, Gibatayo means tear down and build, because the explanation came from Kalinda, one of the leaders in Asamba, because according to her, we endured countless midnight and dawn demolitions just to protect our homes. Our houses were torn down again and again, and each time we rebuilt it. So after Giba tear down, they will build it again. So this monograph is a life history of the community, or Asamba's life struggles and victories as they resisted and faced repeated demolition, both state and forest, in the Aranetas. Next slide. But yeah, to provide context, who are the Aranetas? In the Philippines, they are one of the prominent and enduring elites who owns malls, hotels, restaurants, and vast estates in Quezon City. Net worth alone of George Araneta, according to Forbes 2021, is 250 million USD. So next, the monographs. So you can see that the pictures. So this was the old pictures taken before the demolition. So the monograph explains in detail what the Situaciones look like even before the Aranetas came into light, because those involved here came even before them, as I've said. The details of their experiences of demolition, what the state enforced during that, what strategies they came up in response to it, and to reclaim their land in Baisa Situaciones. And lastly, how they build their own housing after they reclaim their land. And included also in the monograph is the vital role of activists who were key in organizing their struggles and keeping the morale high despite all that happened. Next slide. Now, who were involved in the publication? The idea of collecting life histories and writing their stories came from Kalinda, one of the leaders, and the members of the Asamba community. They initiated this project. Christine Sincero organized the data, including Carl Hapal. They used focus group discussions, photos, archives, as sources to facilitating life histories. They also interviewed and consulted back-to-back with Asamba's first-generation leaders such as Tita Flora, Kalinda, Nanay Lourdes, Tatay Joseph. All of these were introduced in the monograph. Next slide. So let me briefly walk through the timeline of their struggles, but I won't go into much detail. So it was 1970s to 1980s. Sitio Mendes was mostly grasslands and dumping grounds. Houses were small huts with no electricity or water lines, yet the community thrived by farming and factory work. Now, 1986 onwards, tripartite agreements promised land distribution, but no genuine relocation or tenure was really given. Fees were even collected by an organization named San Martin de Porres even before the Asamba. But it ended up Araneta's being able to buy Sitio Mendes from their fellow members. And that betrayal pushed residents to formally organize as Asamba. Now, next. The years of demolition from 1991 to 1997, imagine that duration. So, there are details in the monograph if you're going to read it. The details like there are, for example, nearly 1,000 demolition crew and police attack. 2 elders even died of heart attacks and 1 leader was killed. Houses were bulldozed and burned. Residents faced tear gas and threats. And one of the leaders in the monographs, her son died because of the tear gas. And all of this happened even though there is a law like Urban Development and Housing Act of 1992, which prohibited this kind of demolition, because no demolition on weekends on legal holiday should happen, and it should be conducted 8 a.m. to 3 p.m. But the demolitions happen when they were sleeping, especially in the times they are very vulnerable. And it was until July 15, 1997 that the complete demolition happened. Next slide. Women like Kalinda, Ate Lourdes, and other women involved in the monograph led the human barricades and negotiations. So family fought back with improvised defenses. They made molotovs which contained human and animal feces. They would throw it to the demolition then as a defense. And they are also negotiating in front of the bulldozers of the barricades. Next slide. So after demolition, around 500 families camped out for 1.5 months at Quezon City Hall. During this period, they held noise barrage, educational discussions on urban poor and national issues. Alongside it is the planning and assessment sessions, the assemblies, pickets, mass actions, and they also tap tri-media coverage, so that includes television, radio, and print to document their camp out. Moreover, alliance work was particularly strong among religious groups, human rights advocates, the activist groups like Sanlakas, and even UN bodies that Tita Flora has networked with. And within the camp, the community effectively even divided their tasks. Some members organized donations, while others took charge of food committee and cooking. And eventually, the government was compelled to purchase the land from the Aranetas with 32.2 million. On August 15, next slide please, they were able to do the victory march, celebrating what they have won. with support groups like Habitat for Humanity, they were able to build their houses within 2 years. So they were able to come back to Sitio Mendes because of the tireless mobilization and organizing of leaders like Tita Flora and Kalinda. Tita Flora was also connected to an architect, also tapped her networks to help build their designs, so with the community. Next slide. But AltDev's continuing engagement did not stop after the Gibatayo publication, because during the COVID-19 lockdowns, Asamba leaders, the Asamba was documented by one of our researchers, Adanesa Aban, and they were able, next slide, they were able to produce a video like this wherein the community really shoot the video wherein they tell their initiatives, their struggles as they navigate the COVID-19 pandemic. And one of the highlights of that presentation is that the community told the video that organizing for them is not that difficult because they have been through a lot given that history of struggle and victory. Next slide. Now, from some reflections from the Gibatayo. Asamba's struggles proves that urban poor are capable agents of change, not passive recipients of state aid. According to Ananeza Aban, their collective action is testament to the power of grassroots organizing, solidarity, and persistence in claiming the right to housing and dignified living. And women and youth actually in the Gibatayo monograph, their role and activists are really highlighted. Next slide. More on the participatory methods reflection as to why life history is important in this kind of work. First, because it allows the community to piece together the shared experiences of displacement, resistance, and survival. This makes the struggle collective rather than an isolated case. It also enables people to recognize this collective strength and resilience, thereby strengthening solidarity. Next, the knowledge comes from the people themselves. The urban poor can actually produce their own history. Through their own historical narratives, communities reclaim their agency. Instead of being framed merely as illegal settlers, or in the Philippines they are called squatters, that obstruct development, they actually assert their position and authority through their historical presence and memory of the Sitio Mendes. And this is especially vital in the Philippines, where the mainstream discourse about urban poor are often criminalized, they are stubborn, and where the state actively seeks to erase them. And lastly, timelines help communities uncover patterns, identify actors, and connect past struggles with present ones. They function as a collective memory and strategy, turning individual experiences into a shared historical narrative that strengthen their solidarity and political agency. Next slide. Now, the challenges, according to the previous researcher, of course, validation takes time because you have to go back and forth because the community actually validates it. And the author itself live actually in the community. And the last challenge right now, because of the COVID-19 pandemic, our connection or the present researchers right now in the program are not really part of the movement building and are not really familiar what is happening right now in Asamba. So that's my presentation for now, and I'm gonna pass it to Marco. Thank you.
Thank you, Eunice. And as the last presenter, as part of the AltDev team, it may help to maybe share with the rest of participants today that I am, aside from being part of AltDev, also a teacher of GIS and the use of geospatial technologies and tools to university students of the Department of Geography, UP. And so the work that we will be presenting on how we have done linking university methodologies for research and what we refer to as extension work or extension service how we've done this with our partner organizations and our partner community in relation to the promotion of capacity building for community development, disaster risk reduction and management planning. Alright, so the subtitle of this presentation is about participatory approaches, focusing on the documentation and the use of geospatial technologies for mapping hazards in order to create, to help the community formulate the community-based disaster risk reduction and management planning, which is actually a part of national policy of the Philippine government for barangays or the villages, the smallest administrative unit, political unit that functions in communities in the Philippines. So next slide, please. So in order to organize the content of this presentation, we'll start first with describing how community-based DRRM, as we call it, is operationalized in the Philippines. And then we'll move on to looking at participatory activities that we have conducted involving students of digital cartography, involving a local organization composed of mothers in our partner community, and then eventually scaling up that initiative to involve the larger community and most of the purok leaders, or what we call community leaders in the study area or in the project area, towards promoting community engaged learning, and in combination with participatory methods, which is of course related to participatory action research. And then we'll move on to looking at our, I will be presenting our activities and the outputs that we were able to generate in partnership with the project area sa barangay in Quezon City. And so we'll be presenting the case study and some reflections about participation involving students and the challenges that we continuously face in relation to continuing our partnership with our target participants and community. Next slide, please. Alright, so next slide, please. So we'll start first with looking at what community-based disaster risk reduction and management is and how it's operationalized in the country. It actually, if you think about it, is an alternative approach when it emerged in mid-1980s. Primarily due to the discontent of many non-government organizations and civil society organizations with how the government responded to a series of disasters during that time. And so, in its roots, it actually underscored the need for alternative approaches that would lead to more citizenry-based and development-oriented kind of disaster response and preparedness strategies. Later on, there were laws and policies instituted in the Philippines, especially in the year 2000s, in 2010 for example, which recognizes the critical role of local government units, local government officials, barangay councils, and the establishment of the Barangay Disaster Risk Reduction and Management Committee within the villages in order to organize activities, operationalize projects in relation to addressing the vulnerabilities of communities who are prone to different forms of disasters. It also, therefore, is like a movement at the same time, focusing not just on disaster events themselves and how to address them, but also to look more critically into the structures and conditions of marginalized communities which make them more vulnerable. So it's more like looking at community-based disaster risk reduction with the perspective of community development, lobbying for participatory approaches in reducing the possible losses of lives, properties, community resources, and the environment. And so I'm actually coaching here one of our known Filipino scholars, Professor Emmanuel Luna, who was one of the first to write about refocusing community-based disaster risk reduction and management and integrating community development in its operationalization. Next slide, please. Alright, so as you would know, in the Philippines, disasters, or approximately 60% of the Philippines land area and about 74% of its population are exposed to multiple kinds of hazards. Many of these would be what we call hydrometeorological hazard events relating to tropical cyclones, which have become very intense, especially in the last 10 years. Storm surge, which are of course related hazards to tropical cyclones. So you have flooding, whenever there's heavy rain, and many of these disaster events are impacting urban poor communities. And one of them are our project site in Quezon City, which is Barangay Catalon. Next slide, please. So now I move on to describing how we actually engaged with different partners. Some of them also coming from institutional academic units within the University of the Philippines. So you can see here the logo of CIDS, our Program on Alternative Development logo. Also in partnership with the Department of Geography, where I am teaching, and my students who are studying digital cartography are heavily involved, or were heavily involved in this project. We also partnered with Ulirat Collective. So Ulirat Collective is more like an alliance of practitioners from different fields. They have geologists, geographers, genetic engineers who would like to promote the use of geospatial technologies, but looking at it from a critical cartography and critical geography perspective, doing efforts to help foreground the situation of marginalized communities, especially in disaster-prone areas. Also on the right, upper right is the logo of Tatalon Nanay Power. Again, this is the community-based organization that we work with, composed of others. They were formed during the time of the COVID-19, 2020, during the lockdown. They assisted their neighborhoods in relation to sourcing food to support their community, members of their community, especially those who have members who are physically unable to acquire food on their own. For example, the disabled members and the elderly members of the community. Eventually, we also partnered with the local government unit of the barangay. So we have also the logo of the Barangay Catalon in this presentation. And then as part of our workshops to help the barangay formulate its community-based disaster risk reduction and management plan, we also invited colleagues with expertise in disaster risk reduction and management. And we partnered with them. They are members of the Philippine Geographical Society. So Philippine Geographical Society is a professional organization of geographers and other experts in related disciplines who are working together to promote the discipline within and beyond the academy. Next slide, please. Alright, so we organized a set of workshops involving students. These are university students. The primary objective when we conceptualized this project was to support the barangay local government unit of Tatalon in documenting and mapping hazard incidents, disaster events, writing down their disaster histories and their experiences in order to create that input that is needed and necessary for the formulation of their barangay disaster risk reduction and management plan, which is a requirement for all of the barangays. in the Philippines in relation to the implementation of the National Disaster Risk Reduction Management Framework. And the activity also wanted to contribute to facilitating the exchange of experiences and documenting local knowledge of the people who are affected by disasters in this particular community, which is called Barangay Batalon. So what you can see in the pictures are students working with Purok leaders or community leaders from Barangay Batalon, mapping the areas where disasters have taken place, hazards like flood and fire events have taken place. And aside from that, we also combined data from scientific papers and research. For example, that from what we call the UP Research Resilience Institute. They have flood models, levels of flood based on 5-year, 25-year, and 100-year return period models or simulations. And we also combine these scientific maps with the maps that were generated from community mapping activities that were facilitated by the students. Next slide, please. All right, so now I'd like to emphasize our approach as a class, which is community engaged learning. So community engaged learning is that approach of involving students in place-based exercises, in going out to the field, even if for a short time, not necessarily for a month-long period, but even if we have very limited time to interact with the community, we make sure that we involve as many as we can manage to accommodate and gather through the assistance of the barangay local government administrators in order to operationalize and in order to actualize this methodology. So it is meant to or designed to mutually benefit both the students because they learn the realities of experiences, lived experiences of people who are marginalized and also experiencing hazard events that disrupt their lives many times of the year because these are disaster-prone areas. And so students engage in different activities that make them realize that learning through real-world context or experiential learning as we call it, and the use of geospatial technologies also highlight or underscore the importance of building spatial knowledge, especially that which is contributed or imparted by those who are actually experiencing these disasters and hazards in the area that we are working with. Next slide, please. So it's really a pedagogical approach, allowing students to immerse themselves into the actual situations of communities that we are working with. So the University of the Philippines is also focusing on its mission and vision of providing public service and making itself more visible in this regard, focusing on underserved and disadvantaged communities. So we're actually also promoting what the university envisions to be its role, aside from research and teaching, really engaging with communities who need assistance in relation to documentation, mapping, and research. Next slide, please. All right, so we also integrate in this process participatory methods such as walking interviews, conducting community walks. So we have community leaders join us during our walk through the community so that students can better understand and experience. And our partners in the community are also able to show the very areas that where they experience disasters and hazards. And not just that, but also what are their mitigating strategies. So the community-based mitigating strategies are also mapped in the process and also visited by the students so they can personally see these features in the study area themselves. In that process, we generate maps using GIS or Geographic Information Systems, our mobile phones in documenting and in mapping. And this process highlights the importance or the role of using readily available high-resolution aerial images such as those that you can get and download from Google Earth in order to perform or conduct community mapping activities. Next slide, please. So, Barangay Tatalon, our study area, as you can see in the map, is right next to the San Juan River. And that particular area on the eastern side is a flood-prone area. The whole community has a population of about 63,000 people, and about 10,000 of these are flood-prone and also living in depressed areas, or some of them actually self-identify as informal settler families. Next slide, please. So in terms of methodology, just a quick rundown of what we actually do and how we put into action these participatory methods of walking interview, community mapping, and participatory mapping. We always do consultations with the Barangay Disaster Reduction Committee members of the LGU, our partner organization, the Tatalon Power, in order to plan for the activities that we will conduct in the community. We also invite and take the time to organize volunteers aside from the students, of course involving the Alternative Development Program staff and also volunteers from Ulirat Collective. So those who have the time to join us so that students will have partners from these different organizations in doing the workshops and the mapping activities. Next slide, please. So aside from that, students are also in charge of formulating the questionnaires for these focus group discussions, the methodology for conducting the workshop, and for the walking interviews at the same time. After these designing of the tools, we go to the area to conduct situation analysis, looking at the place and visiting the disaster-prone areas to document their situation and their conditions. Next slide, please. So far, we have generated a series of outputs from these what we call academic field activities. No? And many of these student outputs are in Filipino or in Tagalog, more specifically, because they are designed for the partners in the community. And we were also able to generate different maps showing points of interest, resources, areas where disaster events happen. So fire-prone areas, flood-prone areas are also there in the map. And you will not find maps that are as detailed as these about this particular area. And it's one of the contributions of the students in relation to gathering data and documenting disaster events. But then, aside from the generation of these outputs, which are actually inputs to the Barangay Disaster Reduction and Management Plan, if the LGU or the barangay chooses to adopt that as their input, and we're working on that process. This collaboration continues, so since we have data, we were able to organize GIS workshops for the youth of the community. So they can also learn how to make use of mobile tools, desktop tools for mapping their own area, whatever they want to show in their maps. At the same time, we also were able to, the community was also able to host the IRASEC Winter School last year. So that's also one of the achievements that we were able to build through this partnership with the community. Next slide, please. Alright, so just to highlight that, as you can see there, the workshops involve the use of aerial photographs, and people are pointing to the different features in their community, and this is the basis for the maps that you saw earlier, showing different points of interest in the area, which they can directly use and include in their barangay disaster risk management plans. Next slide, please. All right, so we're now down to a few reflections that we were able to think about and continue to think about actually in relation to this partnership. So we've divided it into three. The first, next slide please, is about the participatory approaches. So what are the features of these collaborative activities involving students, volunteers from partner organizations, volunteers from the community? We were able to engage community representatives, resource persons with the technical knowledge on how we formulate community-based disaster reduction and management plans, following the policy of the national government. Collectively, through the participation of community representatives, they were able to collate and organize data and create maps out of these important data. It also, in the process, therefore, strengthens the efforts of the community to align their activities, their planning for disaster risk reduction and management to the local context and experiences of the people who are actually living in these disaster-prone areas. And lastly, it also opened up opportunities to enhance place-based learning among the students. And in fact, as you can see in the photo, we organized together with the Office of Field Activities in UP Diliman a post-international conference where students were able to share their experiences through this process of participatory mapping and walking interview and creating and co-creating maps with community members in Barangay Tatalon. Next slide, please. Also part of these reflections focus on participation. So it's a difficult question really to evaluate how much participation our activities are actually incorporating with respect to involving community leaders, because admittedly, of course, we have limited resources for this. There are 100 puroks or small subdivisions of the barangay, and it takes resources and time to involve everyone. So we often do this one workshop for the whole day, because the barangay also doesn't have that time to accommodate us. So we really have to maximize our resources and the time that the barangay can provide us in order to do these activities. Another limitation that we think with respect to participation is that we believe that there are also critical commentaries that may come from community members, but since those who are attending these sessions are kind of recruited by the barangay officials, so there's not a lot of critique with respect to their programs. But we believe that there are, but we need to seek these spaces beyond the control or the reaches of the barangay. And we do that, we also do that. But in order to involve more and to also make use of the resources of the barangay, we conduct the activities within their session halls, for example. And that's also kind of limiting in many respects. It's also important to look at internal issues among community members themselves. What we notice in these activities is the absence of the youth. And then when we further asked our participants, we found out that there is this, the Sangguniang Kabataan, or the Council of the Youth, actually has many internal problems among themselves, limiting their participation, not just in our activities, but in the activities of the barangay in general. So the last slide shows us, next slide please, reflections on the sustainability of these activities or partnerships. The very repetitive experience of flood and fire in these areas are also factors to this sustainability. Why? Because the barangay would prioritize rescuing, and this happens multiple times in a year. So we have to time our activities with avoiding these phases or seasons where there's just intense rain and you would expect that flood will be taking place again. So it kind of also limits that the sustaining this engagement. The limited time that we have for a semester, and also the limited resources of the students themselves. So if we were not able to partner with AltDev, who supported our activities, it would be difficult if only students and our class would be in charge of these activities. We haven't really thought about the tools for gauging the benefit with respect to having maybe more of an assessment tool that we can adopt for this, but we will be working on that. And lastly, the very important question of whether and how much would be the commitment of the Barangay Council to integrate our outputs in the plan itself. Because the leadership has changed in a matter of 1 year. So what we noticed was everyone in the barangay hall were no longer there because the barangay captain was somebody else now, because the former barangay captain unfortunately passed away last year. And so we're now like renewing our relationship again with those who are now sitting there as staff members of the barangay captain. So it's really a very challenging engagement if we will be thinking about how to sustain it for a longer time. Yep, and so this is where my presentation ends. Just a few slides just to show and acknowledge, sige, next slide please. Briefly, the students who were involved here, next slide please. Many batches of students from 2023 up to last year and this year, next slide please. Our volunteers from different organizations and of course the Barangay Tatalon Council for facilitating our activities. Next slide please. And just to of course acknowledge my fellow AltDev members who were very actively involved in these activities of the students and the many other activities that emerged from this engagement. So again, thank you everyone, and we hope that with the sharing that we were able to accomplish, with the limited time that we have, you have seen some examples of the work of the Program of Alternative Development and our partner organizations and institutions. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much to the 4 speakers of the Philippine research team. We will have the discussion after next session, which will be from Yulia Sugandi. Yulia Sugandi has engaged with participatory methodologies and their innovative evolution for over 2 decades. Through her collaboration with various entities, she promotes policies focused on ecological awareness and collective learning for planetary justice. Yulia has designed curricula, delivered lectures and training, executed participatory action research, and experimented with tools to bolster systems resilience and gender equity. At the same time, she has advised organizations, including the United Nations, promoting exclusive knowledge that dismantles barriers and fosters evidence-based policy through empathetic leadership, ensuring that marginalized perspectives inform public policy for impactful social transformation. Let's welcome Ibu Yulia Sugandi, who will talk about her experience in transdisciplinary research in Papua.
This morning we're going to talk about relational science. Actually, my presentation is the invitation for everybody to pay attention on the relationality while doing the research. But this relation is not only relations between the study participants and the landscape, but also relations between the knowledge holders and also the learners. The learners, we would like to learn from the knowledge holders. And what are the impacts of this participatory in deep learning? So this is what we are going to talk about this morning. Okay, so we need to understand what kind of the world we're living in. Any participatory method, it means that we are trying also to find a really better solutions in the world that we currently live in. So we need to understand what kind of the really complex world that we are in today. So the very interconnectedness, that one of the things, the pattern of the relations between one issues and another's. So if you talk about SDG which number always correlated with another SDG. So that's this really pattern of interconnectedness. And of course, it also influenced the way we see the global risk landscapes, which is very much like really the complexity, pattern of interconnectedness and the complexity. So all of this is the method that we are going to discuss. Should be able also to accommodate and to tackle, to understand, to make sense of this complex world that we live today. So, I think this morning we already talked about this wicked problem, yeah? The intersections between the uncertainty, the value propositions, and also the complexity. And here's Jakarta, Rob Jakarta, and currently we have also the flooding, like massive flooding also in Bali. But this is the world that we are currently living. Actually, there's a really classic publications written in 1973 about what does it mean. What does it mean about wicked problems? So the wicked problems, if you talk about wicked problems, the solutions. There's no such thing as like really. There's no such thing as really solve, because every problem is unique, and the one solution's ramifies throughout the whole systems, and the problem is very unique. Solution is not only about right or wrong, or better or worse. So this wicked problem, definitions of wicked problems, to understand, to make sense the complexity. We have to have that in a back of our mind if we would like to intervene in certain contexts. So what kind of solutions these are really fit to understand this complex world? Okay, wicked problems. But not all the problems are born equal, so we need also to identify which problem we are going to interfere. Okay, the first one is a very simple problem. The solution is very, very simple too. The solution should be like quick fix. We have a flat tires, we don't pay attention on the whole car, just focus on the flat tires and change the tires. And so it's quick fix. Next, complicated. So bear in mind, each of the problems has different type of change elements. So the first one, the change, is a quick fix. The second one is complicated. It is complicated. It's like the car assembly factory, but the change can still be planned and managed. It's also like a rocket. It's complicated, but you can push only one button and you can really control where the rocket goes. So the change can be planned and managed. Well, the third one is complex, like a traffic jams. You want to cross the road, but there, people crossing the road. It's like really so many different elements coming out. So the change is emergent. And the fourth one is crisis. This is what we are having now. We have climate crisis. Change is disruptive. So different type of different type of problems. Now, the more you go to the right, actually, the core problems is more human, because IPCC said that climate crisis is not ecological crisis, is not environmental crisis, it's the crisis of humanity. So the climate crisis is humanitarian crisis. So while on the left, the problems which are simple and complicated, the solutions would be so technical, like the nature of challenge is so mechanical. You can solve it by building construction, protocols, procedures, and so on and so forth. But problems can be clearly defined and broken down into smaller issues and can be resolved using available knowledge and expertise, best practices, guidelines, and so on and so forth. But on the right side, you cannot have these best practices, because practice is always embedded. colleagues from the Philippines both about the embedded. So to practice the solutions should be embedded in the context. While the problems, simple and complicated problems, can be solved technically by expert and authority, the complex and crisis, the solution should be adaptive. Nature of challenge is more behavioral, cultural, social, political. Knowledge about the problem is partial and provisional. There are no precedents required experimentation and probing. And for the adaptive, for developing adaptive solutions, it requires a wider ecosystems to work at different levels across on solving the problem together. So you cannot solve or develop the solutions which are in the complex and the crisis context with technical solutions. So the solutions should be compatible with the level of the problems that we are dealing with. I think the colleagues from the Philippines already displayed some very good examples about wicked problems and kind of proposed solutions, how this really, the urgency, the importance of co-creations of knowledge productions to be able to develop the adaptive solutions. Okay, so the way we approach also the problem cannot be linear from A to B, because it only takes us very into technical leads. It should be changed, because otherwise we have this law of unintended consequences, where you have this really complex systems behind a certain reality, and you just think, okay, this complex systems, just you put the one-size-fits-all solutions, which is very technical solutions, which are compatible with the complexity of the context. And this is the dangerous part. The greatest danger is not the turbulence, but it is to act with yesterday logic. So if the way we think is still very linear and trying to solve the complex context, then you just add, develop solutions with another issues, problems. So in Indonesia we call it menyelesaikan masalah dengan masalah, solving issues with another issues. So creating more problems, layers of problems, instead of really providing really sustainable solutions. Now, in IPBS report, Intergovernmental Science Policy Platform on Biodiversity and Ecosystem Services, the latest report published talking about the nexus approaches. So how it is really important to have this really nexus approaches, where you see the interlinkages of different type of element and how it is really a foundational to develop like really a good adaptive solutions to deal with it. Yeah, so it's like acupuncture. In Asia, we have this acupuncture. So in acupuncture, well, in the Western you call it leverage point. But we have it also already, we have been practicing acupuncture for centuries. And in acupuncture method, you cannot push one leverage point only. You have to push different type of leverage point. This is what we call a nexus approaches. But we have it already in our own cultures called this acupuncture. Yeah. So why is it difficult to change the systems? Because as long as the solutions develop and the way we see things is still very much linear, we are not going to be able to capture the complex reality and develop a proper solutions for that. So, yeah. I think James Scott's really classic book, Seeing Like a State, really displays that, where he describes about these two different type of forests. One is ineligible natural forest, and the other is like a really scientific forest, where you put things in category. When you put things, well, scientists are, concerned about categorization, so everything should be put in the box and should be labeled by so-called scientific label. So you put them in the box and you codifying. And according to James Fox, it is like this scientific legible forest actually eliminated all different types of really valuable parts of the ecosystems. Because once you clean up and codifying and make it like a new different type of ecosystems, there are other parts which are really have been eliminated because they do not fit with the new indicators or develop box. So we must never assume, he said, we must never assume that local practices conforms with the state theory. This is really usually applied what colleagues from the Philippines said, alternative perspective on development. We must never assume that there's like really local practices confirm with the state's theory on development, for instance, on what it means by the quality of life. You must never assume that all of the indicators can be applied to all different contexts. So, what to do then? You should be able to capture the complex development challenges by having really good skills on zooming in and zooming out. So zooming in, meaning that seeing in detail. These are the pictures from Merauke when there's been like really large landscapes change, where the hundreds and hundreds of hectares have been like really deforested for the sake of food security, national food security. So we need to be able to zoom in. So what's really happened on the ground? Of course, for zooming in, we can have this different type of tools like also community walk and so on, and ethnography and so on and so forth. But at the same time, we should be able also to zoom out, seeing from the big pictures, maybe with GPS or satellites or different type of method. So you see the system, different part of the systems in details, but at the same time, you should be able also to view the systems from above. So we need both. We need zooming in and zooming out. So, okay, like illustrated by the pictures on the right. So once each of these people should be able to describe very detailed in each part of the elephant they see, that is zooming in, but at the same time we collecting all of this different type of understanding and perspective, so that you be able to see the whole picture of an elephant. That's the illustrations. Now, if we would like to address the complex challenges through system thinking, such as acupuncture method, and there's 6 principles called FANS. The first one is frame the challenge as something that is collectively owned. So it's not owned by the learners coming from outside, not owned by a certain part of the groups, but it's really should be able to define by all of the people involved within the systems. And E, establish a convening group that is diverse and represents multiple perspectives and interests. Nudge inner and outer world, mindset, belief, motivations, and values, as well as the outwardly appearing component of the systems. So, if we would like to address complex challenges through systems thinking, it's not only interconnectedness from the knowledge holders and their landscapes, but also interconnectedness within ourselves, because each of us, we are also part of the system, and we are the systems ourselves. Our thinking, our being, our doing. It's a sustainability mindset, thinking, being, doing. So should be able also to bring the impact on us as a learner. So this is what is called as nudge. Center, an appreciation of complexity. experimentations, rapid learning, adaptations, embrace complex and connections, chaos and order, holding multiple views simultaneously. It means that we should be able to embrace differences. So, to address complex challenges through systems thinking, by applying this principle of embrace, it means that research as part of the dialogue, building dialogue, interdialogue between different parts of the community, but also dialogue with ourselves. So it's kind of like a dialogue in and outer part of the, in building, developing the knowledge productions or epistemology. We will discuss it further. The last one is develop innovative solution that can be tested and scaled. Indeed, best practices may not work in every unique context, so we need to be able to understand the uniqueness of each of the contexts. What does it really mean? We talk about learning indicators for adaptability. Now, this is the latest publication from IPBS. It says, like, what are the elements that influence the system transformations? The system transformations can be manifested if we are able to transform these three elements: the views, structures, and practices. And these are these three underlying causes of why we have this crisis, ecological crisis today. The first one in disconnection from and dominations over nature and people. Again, talking about pattern of relations. So the pattern of relations of domination, this is one of the underlying factors of our crisis today. I would like to focus on these connections of from and domination over nature and people, and how it is really important to pay attention on the pattern of the relations between people and the ecological landscape and people with other people also. And then these are also the other elements that influence these three underlying factors. I would like to focus on this. Here you see the limited access to clean technology and uncoordinated knowledge and motive and innovation system. So if the knowledge productions is not being integrated, that will not be able to transform the whole systems. One of the most important elements, which was already described by colleagues from the Philippines, is marginalizations of indigenous and local cultures. And I would like also to share why it is really important to pay attention on the knowledge from the experiential-based knowledge from the local community and indigenous people. And these are really related to the element that can transform the whole systems. Yeah, and we see this indicator, how to see the system transformations and what happened now. And we see the high inequality who were responsible for the climate crisis, very much related also to the social inequality because of the, this is one is in Indonesians. It says the 10% of the richest is the one who contribute the carbon footprint the most. So what are the indicators then about the well-being? This is, and the second one, we can see also the Human Development Index, okay, the indicator of the progress, Human Development Index, but based on the results also, the country that which has also the highest Human Development Index, also the ones who contribute to the carbon footprints. So we question what kind of indicator they should be able to value what is the progress that we would like to see. And then another indicator is based on GDP. Again, indicator of this economic progress, economic growth, indicators of HDI, indicators of GDP, they are all indicators which we are using now to measure whether some countries are developed or not. But in realities, they are also contribute carbon footprint the most. So the issue is overconsumptions, not overpopulations. This raised the questions about what kind of indicators we have used to measure development. Ilan Kelman said that all of the disasters that we have now, even UNDRR said there's no such thing as natural disaster because all of the disasters are all man-made. We made the disasters. There's transitions between hazard to disasters, and whether we make like a really good, proper public policies will determine, you know, that this hazard is going to turn into a disaster or not. So that's why he said like disaster by choice. So it is really important and crucial that we have really a proper indicator. Otherwise, we will have, you know, we will create our own disasters, as Ilan Kelman explained. Yeah, it's a good heart law. What is really important also to have a really good proper disasters, because otherwise then, for instance, when a measure becomes a target, it ceases to be a good measure. So it is good heart law, and you get what you measure. So as long as we have this really irrelevant, uncontextual indicators, how we measure our well-being, we will not be able to, you know, to achieve our shared goals, to our interventions, whether it's done by government, researchers, or it's really important to get a proper indicator. So what we measure. So what we measure is important because we're thinking about how to capture and incorporate a different form of information. So not only quantitative data, to be able to zoom in and zoom out, we should be able also to have like a different type of form of information, such as stories, emotions, world models, and relationships. And we should constantly be asking ourselves, what data is missing? Whose voices are missing? What untested assumptions are we making? And how do these obscure other truths? We need to be reflecting on how our positions and power in the world shapes how we gather, interpret, and ultimately make decisions using the information we have collected. And how we measure should we also be reflected on how we measure, what we measure, how we measure, and why we measure. So measurement should not be used for top-down control, but rather to learn about complex problems and the people experiencing them, so we can adapt and improve our approach. So to be able to, for us to develop an adaptive solution that fits to understand the complex reality and the crisis we are having today. It is really important that measurement coming bottom-up approach in developing indicators for measurements. That's what it's all about. Yeah. So to understand the reality, for instance, one of the methods can be anything, but one of the examples to understand the complex reality, to have this really bottom-up understanding about the complex reality using ethnographic research. But ethnographic research is not just finding out what people think, listening to what they say, or watching that they do. But ethnographic reality, it means the commitment to be there. The learners should be committed to be there with the people. And what ethnographic produces is not only descriptive work, field work, but the value in what makes the story make sense. So it's not only the combinations of the narratives, but what makes sense. What narrative, how to make sense those narratives. And of course, this ethnography can be used for the government to reframe the social world. So to reframe the social world, to address the complexity of society by understanding people better in the context of their life. This is the key. So we need to shift from output mentality of the data. The output, it means the data, so like we did just to evaluate what we have done. That's the output mentality. So we need to shift from output mentality to the input mentality. The input mentality, you will ask like, you know, the data, who should I serve, how should I adapt my program for each individual, what will be the program impacts. So start to thinking program impact in the beginning rather than when evaluating the program. So you are now thinking about to evaluate the program and do this by the end of the intervention. So we should think already about the impact-driven language since the beginning of the designing interventions. So we need to move away from output-oriented, the checklist, into the impact-driven interventions. Of course, if in input mentality, it means that we need also to pay more attention on the method and the tools that we use. So for instance, for the FGD, FGD is the simplest one. I mean, you invite everybody like we have now, invite everybody in one room and let everybody talk. But you don't know actually the reality of the context reality of each of the persons that we are here in the room. I only know you based on what you describe, but I don't know you in your context. So that's what the FGD miss. So you miss the other part of the context, the complex reality of each individual, of each knowledge holders they come to the place. So the second one is PFGD, participatory FGD. It's already displayed also by the colleagues from the Philippines. Participatory PFGD, it means that you share. Their participatory meaning sharing power. So you give the mic to the people to share. This is an example. A woman farmer. It's from actually only a week ago in Papua. We are doing research on agroecology. So she's our teacher, explaining to us about this agroecology in the highland of Papua. So she's knowledge holder, and we, a part of the research team, listen to her carefully about what experience and her experience, her knowledge about the landscape and so on, how her practice are related to agroecology. So there's like a really sharing power in epistemological process. Of course, it can be done also with the children. The children also in the Bedhead region of the Papua, explaining about what really determinant elements impacting of their well-being. So here, they're more like a space for everybody to contribute in the knowledge co-productions. And the third one, immersions. So here, I was learning about planting a seed from the Papuan farmer. So the more you go to the right, it requires flexibility emotionally from us, flexible in emotion, flexible in cognitive. It requires us more flexible because we are the one who immerse in the context of the people. Sorry. Oh, masih banyak? Masih banyak? Okay. Those different type of data, because each of the method and tools produce different type of data. So of course, the data produced by this immersions method is thicker. It can capture the warm data. Yeah. So this is the term from Nora Bateston, is the daughter of Gregory Bateston, who just published a book called Combining, and she called it a warm data. So it's not about the Quantitative data, qualitative data, we are over that discussion, so we talk about cold data and warm data. So what does it really mean by warm data? Warm data, it shows the relational information that describes many parts of the systems. So for example, to understand a family, one must understand not only the family members, but also the pattern of relations. Warm data, meaning that we pay more attention of the pattern of relations, the power dynamics between different parts of systems. The information that is aligned with warm data also can help us to foster compassion during emergency. Oh, this is an example of I use the warm data in my research. To be able to capture like really the vulnerable groups and all of the challenges, like for instance the people with disability, different level of vulnerability in among the vulnerable groups. We call it like horizontal inequalities. So if we have this warm data, we will be able to capture different parts of the vulnerabilities. Like you cannot compare, like for instance, the people of disability in the island of Papua with people with disability also in the island of Java. Because in there you have this really social ecological pressures which are different. So if we are able to be able to capture the warm data, then we are be able to identify the different levels of the vulnerability among vulnerable groups, so that enable us to design a really proper interventions. Yeah. So the relations here between the knowledge holders, they are direct experience, and factors contribute to the experience, and we need also to see the wider factors affecting the indigenous populations in Papua, Pegunungan, in the mountain of Papua, so that we are able to identify the uniqueness of each of the contexts and measure the resilience of the systems. Yeah. So what's the point of understanding the complexity here? Because when research is detached from the lived realities of communities, it becomes a tool of erasure and epistemic violence. Okay, I make it fast. So the bloom. So the development as a social-political transformations, it has two paths. First one is the formal economic, the second one is constructions of the cultural values. Yeah. So how to define the concept of progress and quality of life? And the first one is formal economic. You have these indicators, one size fits all, and the other one is the constructions of the cultural values. It means that depends on the social constructions of each community. This is regular development, usually business as usual, result driven, and reductionist of modern social change, like econocentric, technocentric, commodity-centric. And with the humanitarian cost, this is what I found during my research in the highland. This is the cost, the high cost, if we keep applying this the universal model to measure the progress. The second one is ethno-development, which is embedded in the cultural values, cultural constructions, that also acknowledge the capability approach, creates genuine opportunities that allow local individuals to identify, evolve, and engage in actions that align with the values. Yeah? And this also why it is really important to accommodate the local knowledge and practices. And now we have the term called sustainability aligned values. That's the term coined by the latest report from IPBS. So sustainability aligned values, which included in the value-centered policy, is the result of accommodating diverse types of knowledge while at the same time addressing the dynamics of power among different parts of these groups. The decolonizing of knowledge productions is really important to formulate the so-called value-centered policy and decision-making framework that incorporate harmonized representation of diverse values, while at the same time tackling inequalities in social and economic standing among participants. So our aim to understand the whole local community knowledge is to formulate the value-centered policy where we can reimagine development and the quality of life. These are the disconnections or dominations of the nature that we discussed, the underlying causes of the crisis that we are having now. Now, Papua. Papua is one of the provinces that has its really highest level of poverty. And then in Papua also that has like a really high level of deforestation. And what are the root causes of deforestation? Because of one of them is, where is it? Because of the permanent agricultures, like the one that we saw the photo earlier about the landscape change in Merauke. So it causes really high deforestations. This is what happened in Papua. So when you talk about the development program, the development programs always accompanied by security approach with the investments, and the investments also accompanied by setting up the military posts and so on and so forth. Yeah. So not livelihood approach, but the government's the development programs always followed by the security approach. Why we need to pay attention on the landscape change? Because the territory of lives, yeah, as a global environmental sustainability. So how does the land degradation impact indigenous peoples and local community? Because they have this inalienable relations between the land, between the people and the land. So when they're being alienated from the land, it produces like really a lot of impacts on the indigenous community, including the losing resources of livelihood, also the cultural roots and identity, and so on and so forth. So we need to have like really good framework how to understand that. We need to have this really regenerations where you combine between human rights and the rights of nature. This is an example in Lebanon. In Lebanon, they map the species of wounded land. It's not only about the people who are, impacted by the landscape change, but also all of these different species within the land also are being impacted, including like really endemic plants and animals and so on. So you need to map, not only do the social mapping, but also do the whole social ecological mapping of the land. This is a collaboration between the researcher and an artist. Yeah. Why is it really important to pay attention to form the whole elements within the ecosystem, within the regenerative cultures? So we need to move from degenerative development to regenerative development. From the degenerative development, the design is very technical, so like also the solution are very technical. You move to the regenerative development, the design is as a living system designs. So you have this sustainable, adding no additional harm, actually sustainable. But you move to restorative, but still like there hierarchy between the people. People do things to nature. In Indonesia, we have this restorative gambut, mangrove restorations. But you do things to nature. Oh, the nature has been, damaged by us. Let's restore the nature. So still their hierarchy. But when you move to regenerative culture, regenerative development, you do think as nature. You do think as nature, and then you include not only human rights, but also the rights of the nature in it. So it would be so much different in the design if we move to regenerative development. Yeah, it fits with the concept of planetary justice. It's not social justice, it's not ecological justice, but the planetary justice. There are three different elements of planetary justice. The first one is justice beyond national border, because climate crisis knows no border. And the second one is justice across generations. The third one is justice for non-humans. These are really important to consider, also justice for non-human, if we would like to move to this regenerative development. Now, IPBS said that we need to pay attention on the different part of pattern of relation between people and their ecological landscape. There are people who are living from nature, living in nature, living with nature, or living as nature. So different different ways of people relate to nature. Now, I would like to give an example in Papua. Why is it really important to pay attention on this ecological relation between people and the landscape through the artifact? For the indigenous community, their artifact is within the landscape. So if there's a change in the landscape, it's also changed their really whole culture and knowledge systems. So one of the examples from the Hubula, the indigenous community in the highland of Papua. So they have their own concept of the cycle of building sustainable good life. And there's this artifact called artifact of the Hubula, pigs, land, and sweet potato. Those are three different artifacts, cultural artifacts that they use to build relations with themselves, with the other people in terms of reciprocity, with their ancestors, and so on and so forth. So when they are really some changes in this artifact, it also changed their pattern of the relations. So these are the artifacts. They are used in the highland. The artifacts within in the nature. And the artifacts is not the artifact that's used in everyday life. So the culture is very much embedded in everyday life. For instance, in agricultural cycle, it's not only about the productions, but also about, again, pattern of relations that they are built throughout the agricultural cycles. So they produce so many different type of relations, not only relations between the farmers and also their agricultural products, but also using that as a medium. Agriculture used as a medium to build like much larger relations. So they have like really rich sustainability aligned values as proposed by IPBS report, because they have intrinsic values, they have instrumental values, which is economic values, and they have broad relational values. So they living from, living in, living with, living as, all complete different type of really pattern of relations. These are we aiming for in our social change processes. Should aim for these diverse types of values that we aim, and we need to learn from the indigenous communities who have practiced this for ages. Yeah. So the fertility of life. Not all the beyond SDG. beyond SDG. There's a concept of fertility of life. The fertility of life, it means the indicators to measure the well-being attached to this really cosmological orders. Now, in pre-modernity, Nicholas Q, but above Nicholas Q said that in pre-modernity, the subject belongs to the object. So there's no such thing as I own the land, but I'm part of the land. I'm part of these landscapes. The modernity separates between the subject and object. So that's what IPBS report said, the domination over culture. That's what we are having now. So to be able to restore, revive our ecological relations, we need to be able also to position ourselves within the landscape. So this is an example of the traditional healer in the highland. There's a sick person, so whatever conditions that we have, like including the physical, mental states of conditions, is always related to another part of the relations, different type of the relations. So this pattern of relations is very important for us because we're having crisis on cultural diversity. So it's not the yes, finish soon. So it's not the biodiversity, but we have now biocultural diversity. So if we are able to capture the complexity by accommodating the knowledge from the local community and indigenous people, we will be able to formulate the proper indicator for biocultural diversity. And this is really, how is it? This is urgent thing to be done. Why? Because in the context of Indonesia, we have this part, like really the number one of the global endangered language. Biocultural diversity is inextricable link between nature, culture, and language. Just because of the cultural object and artifact, as you saw just now, are in the landscape. So if some of the cultural artifact in the landscape are missing, you miss also the language. This is what happened in some part of Indonesia. Because of the cultural artifact attached in the landscapes disappeared, so then also the language also disappeared. And this is the result of that conducted by one of the research cluster in my organization, Future Earth. So every year we produce a research called New Insight, 10 New Insight on climate science. And this is one of the latest insight on climate science that we did. We did a research in Amazon. So why is it really important for us to formulate this biocultural diversity indicators? Because it's very much influence the system's resilience against climate change. Yeah. So, what is transdisciplinarity? Is this piece of cake. You don't taste the egg, you don't taste the flour, but you taste the cake. So doing a transdisciplinary research, it means like you're making a really yummy cake. Well, everything's blends into a new regenerate a new form. That's a transdisciplinarity. Yeah. So in transdisciplinarity, like for instance with the indigenous research, again, in the relational science model, required like different part of element to develop, to integrate different part of the knowledge systems. Yeah? And you required also, that's already described, explained by our colleagues from the Philippines. require trust, and all of these different type of elements required to build a really good, proper relational science model that can produce the really yummy transdisciplinary cakes. Of course, to be able also to have this really data empowerment. Yeah? So move away. It's not about that. It's not data about them. Data that saves their lives, but data empowerment where people also can decide, exercise, and demand. Yeah, most of the reports, like a regular report, are not widely read. So how to make like a really good research, like really lively and useful at the same time, so like really relevant for, particularly for the impacted communities. And to weave that kind of language, I think the colleagues from the Philippines already explained about the importance of connections and trust. So in weaving the knowledge, to be able to drive a system change, we need this, the collective sense-making, connection and trust, and also translations and integrations. So transdisciplinarity, meaning that you're doing a deep learning, exploring root causes, value systems, assumptions, structure and power relations, reimagining of ourselves. Yeah. This is like a really commitment to a real learning. But what does it take if we would like to apply transdisciplinarity? What does it take? What are the attributes? What are the attributes required to be able to do really good, proper transdisciplinary research? We need to have this transdisciplinary mindset. Transformations. First, there should be multiple perspectives. The second one, merging formal and experience-based knowledge. It's not only knowledge from academics, but also experience-based knowledge. Radical self-inquiry, because you also debunk, not only debunking process towards what other people think, but also debunking towards your own way of thinking. A thoughtful and emotionally engaged perspective is not only about the intellectual, but also exercising your senses and raising empathy. Open-ended, so it's not only the solutions, it's not the end, but always open for prototyping. Equality, non-dogmatic methodology, holisms, and participatory. So these are the transdisciplinary mindset transformations elements required to be able to do very good transdisciplinary research. Yeah, we're aiming for this eureka in the research, but to be able to generate new ideas, a really good proper solutions, we need also to have this anthropological mindset, always asking by why, immerse ourselves in understanding and meaning, continuously validate our finding and adjust to understanding along the way. So this is like how to generate the innovative findings in our transdisciplinary research. It should start with the rethinking cycle, where you start thinking with humility, and you have a doubt, and then curious about something, then it might result in discovery. But if you start with the overconfidence cycle, whether which expertise we have, you start with exploring things with pride, but you need, then you go for convictions, and you will have the confirmation and desirability bias. In the end, the results only validation is not only discovery. And the second one is to have epistemological awareness, because we need to understand that how we learn, how it affects what we think we know, and how we perceive and distort the reality of others. Robert Chambers, whose reality counts, said like, we create what we want to see, and the more powerful we are, the more often we do this, and the more it's done to us, for us, at the cost of their reality and pluralisms, diversity and truth. So all of these different type of questions should be able to continuously raise these questions when we try to understand, to make sense the complex realities. So whose reality counts, whose reality, whose knowledge, whose priority, whose appraisal, and so on and so forth. So this epistemological awareness are really essentials in order to be able to generate innovative findings. And the last one is ecological reflexivity. Why? This is Edgar Morin. I don't know if I pronounce it. Edgar Morin is a sociologist, philosopher, French philosopher, and also one of the really prominent thinker in transdisciplinarity. Complex thought take us to the knowledge of knowledge, metacognition, reflections. So reflection is really important, not just about what we think, but how we think and why. The reflexivity is reconsider core value, our core value, be something different when necessary rather than just do something different, be aware and question own attitudes, thought processes, values, assumptions, prejudices, and habitual actions. So all of this reflexivity also as a learner, we need to be able to do that while learning from the knowledge holders. And Dulce and Pickering said there's one skill that required in this Anthropocene era. It's called ecological reflexivity. So recognitions, response, reflections, starting from listening for changes in social ecological systems. So listening is really essential. Unlearning is also essential to be able to unlearn and relearn. And in reflection. So it is like really the whole cycle should be done continuously. So reflexivity, yes. So framework for reflexivity as a transformative capacity for sustainability sciences. So if we have this epistemological awareness and also ecological reflexibility, we will be able to weave the knowledge from different parts of the elements in the ecosystems in transdisciplinary research. So I end my presentations with this, that knowledge is not a commodity. Knowledge, it is a relationships. Okay, let's discuss.
Thank you so much, Dr. Julia. Sorry to hurry you up. I'm aware that we began the conference so late, so it's all our responsibility that we will have to shorten a bit the break for the lunch. Before, let's have a discussion. It will be opened by our discussant Jean-Christophe with some reflections, and after that, everyone can ask his own questions.
So, my intervention is about kind of preparation based on the presentation this morning, preparing for tomorrow discussion around a special issue. How do we bring together all this knowledge and this common history and experiences around these three words that were introduced by Gabriel initially? How to be comparative. So we have cases from the Philippines, cases from Papua and Indonesia and global level. How to be reflexive. In both cases, you were very much reflexive on your approach, and maybe if we want to project ourselves in the future and avoid repeating what has been done for the last 30 years or more on participatory research, how to be regenerative. That's a word that has been used initially by Gabriel, and then again when you introduce relational science and maybe regenerative science. Let's see what it would mean to engage into this kind of broader spectrum. What I understand also is that in some cases, this participatory research is becoming also transformative research. And there is this intention of, especially in the case of the Philippines, with community engagement, but I guess also it's the same in Papua. The intention is to be transformative somehow, and this is something that we need to check. If it's descriptive, and then we bring the knowledge to the community, and then it's up to them to engage, or if we are in a stewardship kind of positionality. So we engage with the community to go together. I mean, in terms of stewardship, and then we got terms in the situation of the Philippines about activism, struggle, areas, this kind of resistance, it's kind of a fight, somehow producing knowledge as researcher to engage into some kind of fighting or some kind of resistance. And this means some kind of positionality. And I'm not sure if in all cases we are in this kind of mindset and this kind of positionality, or if it's only a few researchers who are in this kind of situation. And this would be very interesting to discuss, especially as I've been working in Vietnam before, in Laos. I spent also some time in doing some research in China on participatory approaches, and I was always surprised when our colleagues from the Philippines are presenting their kind of activism, engagement with community, as researcher, resisting with other people. It's completely impossible in the kind of environment I was working in Laos or Vietnam. This kind of positionality is forbidden. I mean, you get back to your country within 1 week as a foreign researcher if we engage that way with the community. So the context, if we want to be into a cooperative approach, the context, political, cultural context matter a lot on what is our positionality as researcher and how far can we go into engaging with the community, the local people, and because we somehow feed emerging movements, maybe social movement, and so we have the responsibility for what will emerge somehow, and in some cases it's not welcome. So we really have to think about this, and that will be interesting because I think in terms of comparative analysis, it will be interesting to bring those elements. So that's one thing that I was very much interested in the presentation this morning. The second one is many times the community is presented as the community, a kind of block of people going same direction together. While if we deconstruct the community, we get into very complex role play with many different actors, playing different roles, having different interests, and so on. And so it would be interesting to know more about how your community look like, the diversity. If and with whom we engage in the community, how and what emerged from that. Then the term validation was mentioned in the case of the Philippines. Who validates what we do, how transformative we are, what the impacts we have, are we responding to our boss, to the community, to who are the beneficiary of what we do. And so this idea of engaging with the community, what is the community we engage with, and the process of validation would be interesting also to compare between the different countries. It was one thing that emerged from the discussion. And another one when you presented about immersive research and how it linked to our emotions, empathy, embodiment of our research topic, because we spend a lot of time with the community. We share a lot of things with them. So we're not neutral observers of them and not external supporters. At some stage we are part of the game. And so how do we address this? How do we decide to keep a reasonable distance, or we fully engage with our emotions, our affects, and how do we manage that? Because as you said, there is what we decide to measure is very important. What we decide to observe is very important, because what we draw our attention on is those things that we change in the system. And so if we ignore something, that thing will not change, because we don't develop indicator about that thing. And that's what we measure, and what we can measure, and what we cannot measure. And very often in research we tend to ignore what we cannot measure, while you show that there is the visible part of the tree, and then the whole invisible part of the tree. And so how do we manage the invisible part? How do we make it visible for others? And that could be also one dimension that could create a comparative framework for us to share our different experiences from Thailand, from Malaysia, Indonesia, the Philippines, around those topics. So those are just ideas, and I'm sure you have many more ideas. And this is just what came to my mind when listening to the two presentation, the two countries' presentation this morning. And so I would be very curious to know how it resonates with you. And I think resonating is also a very important word as compared to reasoning, and because it's also touch our affects, and all what you mentioned about relational science, about humility, reciprocity, integrity, respect, and all those things, and how things resonate to us may also help building this comparative elements and discussion for the discussion we will have tomorrow about this joint venture around a special issue or a joint document that we engage into some kind of comparative work. So I don't know if we have time now to engage in I would be very curious to know what resonates for you, what I say.
there any reaction from the speakers?
Thank you for your comments. I really appreciated what you said, and it made me go back to my own research with women on reproductive politics and reproductive health. So on the comment about the community, and it is true, I agree with you, we tend to make it appear that the community is a solid, monolithic entity, and that when we present it, it's like everything merges together and there are no competing interests within the community. But we can attest that there are so many varying, contradictory, competing views, perspectives in the communities that we work with. The dilemma for me, for example, when I was doing my own research, is that it was, I was monitoring the debates on reproductive health at the time. So it was advocates, the social advocates for reproductive health, feminists, and we have the pro-life groups. So it's a very contentious debate, and it was a national debate. And I consider myself part of the women's movement, and I am protective of that movement. But I also saw practices that I question. And while writing my research, I asked myself, should I write about that? Do I know how to make sense of that practice in such a way that I could explain it? And in the end, I didn't include that because I couldn't grapple with it. And it was a decision that I had to make as a researcher. So when I was asked, what did you leave out? So in research, what we include, what we leave out is as important as the things that we include. Maybe sometimes more important. Because these are the things that we can't talk about. Because the stakes are high in politically charged context. So it's not just about being neutral or objective, but again, positionality. But of course, I still go back to that context, particular situation, and I would sometimes ask myself, how can I write about that in a way that I can explain it well? And I will have some reflections that would help all of us make sense of why these things happen. So that's my reaction to the issue about community. Now, regarding the positionality of always having to fight, it feels like that in the Philippines. We always have to fight. And it's tiring, it's exhausting. But we are only able to fight if we are embedded in organizations. I can see myself as a lone researcher fighting. I can't do that, and I don't want to make promises to the community. So unless I embed myself in some structure, then sometimes you feel as powerless as the communities you work with. Also, about the, not everyone can be a scholar activist. And we do have a tradition in the Philippines of scholars really having that activist orientation. But more and more, it's becoming harder. The university is also changing. And it is sad, because now everyone's vested in global rankings. And you have professors, faculty, who are more vested in producing research because they want to get promoted, not because they want to change what's happening in communities. So to me, it's an alarm, an alarm bell for all of us. Also, so I studied in the US and I stayed there for about 13 years. And I saw the tradition, or how scholars were trained there. And it's impossible, as you said, it's impossible to be both scholar and activist. For some reason, I get the impression that if you declare yourself an activist and a scholar, you diminish your value as a scholar. And so I was even advised by well-meaning mentors, downplay your activism because you will be seen as not objective, and you will be seen as ideological or too ideological, and you have to have that stance of being a scholar and remote and above it all. And I knew then that it wasn't for me. And yeah, that made me realize I can't do scholarship in the US. I had to, although it was really the plan, but I had to go back to the Philippines because I felt that there was something else outside of the university that I wanted to do. So that's just my personal sharing.
Okay, I just want to share my experience as a young researcher and an activist. Similar to Prof. Dulce, I was researching sexual and reproductive health rights, particularly teenage pregnancy, teenage motherhood. So I was like observing teenage pregnancy, teenage mothers in the Philippines, very detached from them. And my training in sociology, when I was in a younger, maybe first to second years, I just felt like the way I understood research, it's like you're detached for the sake of objectivity. But then when I was like growing older, I realized the way we do research, it actually reflects my positionality and my interests as an activist and as a woman who grew up in an urban poor community, and as someone who grew up with a lot of women. And then I realized when I was writing my research, although I did not interview teenage mothers, but I was tracing the discourse, how they were framed, how they were problematized. The discourse is like in the present study, it showed that teenage mothers are being accepted in the community, in the society, the Philippine society at least. But the way I see it, it's not. There are different ways of problematizing women and providing solutions to them. And that reflects my positionality because I was always critical of how society sees women and sees survivors like me. And when I work in AltDev, I realized that doing research, you cannot really detach yourself from what you're writing, because as what my professors have been telling you is, I can see that you are an activist in your work. why do you keep not like telling it? Just say it that you're an activist. And right now, all of my research, I try to practice it in my advocacy. So I am one of the facilitators in comprehensive sexuality education training. And as much as you know, you have that activist orientation, you will encounter actually youth men that believes that women must be left virgins. They believe in virginity, and you have to be strategic about it. So I think that's my realization. I don't want my research interests be confined with papers. I want it to translate into advocacy work. So, I mean, it's another way of, I think, transforming or contributing something to help the youth, youth like me when I was young. So yeah, I think that's my sharing. I don't know if that makes sense, but yeah.
Yes.
If I may just react, and then maybe we can continue. What I get from your feedback is there is something around positionality and something about sensing, feeling things more than rational description, nurtured description. How we engage with others and with the dialogue. And when you presented about adaptive space versus technical space, there is this, what I find in many participatory research, there is this space that we create where we can engage in a dialogue and we can sense the other, the interaction, and then something emerges from that space. And very often, what is important is the quality of the space we create, the secure space that we manage to create. Something will emerge that we don't know about before, and there is this uncertainty or the elements of the wicked problem that you introduced. That can emerge from that space. And what I see is that sometimes this space is about a struggle and there is fear in there. And sometimes it's more inspiring and this is more about hope. So it can be positive or negative. And it would be also interesting to explore this when what emerge is out of fear or out of hope. So that maybe something to think about. And then your feedback is very much about how you are sensing the relation with the others and how you feel authorized or not authorized to speak out how you feel in the participatory process. Because this has implication on our research, on our career, on what we feel is expected by the world of science. But then if we decide that we jump into regenerative science, then it's what we need to mobilize. I mean, all those things that we have hidden before, because it was not safe to present in kind of what we think is traditional science, what was expected from us. If we move to relational or regenerative science, this is maybe what we should valorize. And so I feel like there is some kind of shift that we could describe in this comparative process. don't know if you see that coming. Personally, I feel it. But maybe it's also the case for you.
We have to go to lunch, unfortunately, because we have so many things to discuss, but if there is maybe a last reaction, it's possible, but a short one, so everyone can have the time maybe to other activities also. So is there any reaction? Yeah? Okay, Julia.
Short one. As I'm into this hope-based communications, then the term coined by Thomas Hobbes, who's been working a long time with Amnesty International. So we shift from what you said, fear, to more hope-based communications in science. And I also experimented again with the Bandung Institute of Technology. We developed so-called solution mapping canvas. So the most common things that we do is problem analysis. You start from understanding problems, and the second one is prototyping. But the least common one is solution mapping. So we start with understanding what type of solutions are already developed by the community. So we use the frame of resilience, or theoretically speaking, we identify the positive deviance. So any interventions that we would do to strengthen this identified positive deviance to support this hope-based communication. That's all. Terima kasih.
Thank you so much. So let's have the lunch now. We are late, but we will be on time at the end of the day, I'm sure.